Hey everyone, this podcast is part of Story Mode, the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. You can support us and gain access to other great exclusive podcasts at patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
Hi everyone.
Hello everyone.
My name is David Bell.
My name is Tom Ryman.
I am Jason Pargin.
And, oh boy, we just watched The Greasy Strangler and An Evening with Beverly, Luff, Linn.
Boy, did we.
My goodness.
Boy, did we.
I thought free drinks were included in this tour.
No! There's no free drinks. I don't know where you got that idea.
It said in the brochure.
The information you got is bullshit.
We don't need even fizzy drinks. Just water would be enough.
You got false information.
We must have free drinks.
No free drinks.
Free drinks now!
No free drinks.
Come on, we want free drinks.
Free drinks. We must have free drinks.
No free drinks.
Free drinks. Free drinks.
Free drinks. Free drinks. Free drinks.
Free drinks. Free drinks. Free drinks. Free drinks. Free drinks. Free drinks.
No free drinks.
Fried drinking.
Nix. Free drink.
You must give me free drinks immediately.
Drop it with the free drinks crap.
We believe in the power of free drinks.
There are no free drinks. And if you're trying to rip me a new asshole, you're making a big mistake.
I don't know if your listeners, do they tend to go watch the movies you guys talk about if they've not seen them yet?
I don't know.
It's a pretty even split. Like sometimes, like I'll get messages from both where people they listen to us without having watched the movie.
Okay.
And then other times they'll be like, oh, this is a movie I wanted to watch, so I'm going to watch it first and then listen to the episode. But I think it's like 50-50.
So I will approach this discussion with the idea that we are warning some people and not just analyzing.
Correct.
These are both films by Jim Hosking.
Yeah.
The director, at least. I believe he also wrote them. He
did.
At least co-wrote them.
He did, yeah.
Co-wrote both with different co-writers each time.
Yeah, the first one was Toby Harvard, Harvard, who did Come to Daddy. He wrote that, if anybody has seen that. Who did he co-write Beverly, Luff, Linn with? David Wyke, who did... he was in the movie Hitch.
I mean, yeah, this all sounds correct. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this information.
Another connection that may help some people: the Greasy Strangler was produced by Elijah Wood's production company, Spectrovision, and for instance, they did the two Nick Cage movies, Mandy and Color Out of Space, recently.
Yeah, Elijah Wood's got some cool taste.
I would, The Greasy Strangler is nothing like those films.
Right.
No, but it is part of his mission to get stuff made that I think otherwise wouldn't get made. I think that's the connecting tissue there. And I do feel like the same type of person that liked Mandy may also like the Greasy Strangler. But I think above all, he has this distinct thing like these are movies that maybe wouldn't have gotten funded under any like a non-crazy person.
Right. So... Jason, you brought these to us.
Right.
To watch.
There's other stuff we could have done, like Project Power, I guess is a big movie that hit Netflix this weekend, but we were like, nope, let's do The Greasy Strangler and Beverly Luff Linn.
I mean, and I feel good about this.
I'm trying to bring movies that are interesting, even if there are people in my life that if I made them or asked them to watch The Greasy Strangler, that would be the end of our friendship.
Right, they would never speak to you again.
Yeah, or they would think it was a prank, and then there's like a small sliver of people I know who would just be quoting it all the time. That's what I love about both of these. I don't know that I enjoyed watching either one of them. It kind of falls into that, not to keep mentioning Dragged Across Concrete every time I'm on the show, it falls into that category of something where I don't know if I liked it. I desperately want to talk about it.
Okay. I think, unlike Dragged Across Concrete, I think the world is better with the Greasy Strangler and Beverly Luff Linn in it, personally. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean it's for everybody. I laughed a lot at the Greasy Strangler. I didn't think I would. I'd been like I knew these movies existed, and I had just never gotten around to them because I knew they were going to be a hard watch.
Yeah,
yeah, and that's why I'm glad you brought it to us, because it's like, well, shit, now I have no choice. I'm gonna have to sit and watch this movie, and like both of the movies feel like they take an eternity to watch.
Yes, they're real slogs. It's like John Waters by way of Tim and Eric is like the best way to describe them, I think, especially the Greasy Strangler.
Let's circle back briefly and explain the Greasy Strangler, because the title is maybe not that descriptive for people who've not seen it.
Right.
But the plot, just the plot, sounds pretty straightforward, where it's a father and a son, and they both fall for the same woman, and she kind of comes between them, and this kind of, it kind of gets into the feeling of inferiority some sons have for their fathers, and this kind of competition that males sometimes have between one another. The extra layer of it is that the father is also a serial killer known as the Greasy Strangler.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is... And then everything about the aesthetic of the movie is unlike anything you've probably seen, where every single surface of every set, every costume, every hairstyle, every line of dialogue is designed to be as unpleasant as possible. Like, the movie is almost punishing in its tone and in the way everything is delivered. And it's not just like gore and gross out stuff. There's like a weird rhythm to the speech. There's edits that hold way too long. There's comedy bits that go on 5 times longer than what they should. Like, it assaults every sensibility you can have, from pacing to just the way people walk, to like their tone of voice, to their hair. Everything about it is designed to kind of like push some button in you.
It's one of the most deliberately repellent movies I've seen, and it's like it's like repellent in every possible way.
And it's kind of, in that sense, it's kind of an achievement. There's stuff in this that I'm like, oh, I wouldn't even think of that as a way to completely disgust me. This movie did make my stomach hurt while watching it.
It's like this is a very gross movie.
That doesn't even get at it, because there's some comedies that are gross out comedies that don't even like they're like Austin Powers movies have some gross out bits, but my grandma can watch an Austin Powers movie.
Right.
She probably would not enjoy the Greasy Strangler.
Well, this and John Waters, they do the same thing where they're like, movies like pretend like people aren't people a lot, and these movies like, I mean, this isn't a good representation of people, but like, they don't turn away from every part of the body and every bodily fluid, and it's stuff that we'd rather not see in movies, but they absolutely, it's unflinching.
And there are no like conventionally attractive people in the movie.
Right.
Everybody is weird looking. Everybody's got like a weird body or some sort of deformity or something, and that's just the world that takes place in.
Right. Because again, outside of movies, people are imperfect. Nobody looks like a movie star. But this ramps it up.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to watch. It reminds me a little bit of a lot of Adult Swim stuff. A lot of Space Ghost Coast to Coast. which will take a joke and drag it on for as long as possible and kill the joke and then revive it again it drags it on.
It's not exactly like it because it's not as like none of the jokes are as are quite as that over the top, although some like a lot of really over the top shit happens in this movie. But like it's like the Will Ferrell sketch where like I think it was Pierce Brosnan is interviewing for a job and he's just like an asshole boss, and at one point he stabs a guy to death with a trident and he just keeps stabbing him for so long that like the audience stops laughing, and then he just keeps doing it so they start laughing again.
Yeah.
There's a lot of this, like one of the very first scenes is just these like the father and the son are taking a group of tourists out on a disco tour, wearing matching pink disco outfits, and they start arguing about free beverages on the tour, and it goes on for like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It feels like,
and it's one of the opening scenes of the movie. Like it's just this totally inconsequential argument that just goes on in a loop. It doesn't progress. The stakes don't raise. It just goes back and forth until long past anyone is still engaged with it. But it just keeps going. And it comes in. It's great that comes in so early because like this is setting the tone. This is what you're in for.
Yeah. It's letting people know right away. Like, look, if you're not into this, you should turn this off right now.
They're also doing subtle things that you might not notice are repelling you. Like, for example, there's no ambient sound in these scenes. It's only dialogue, music. Like, there's no sounds of the wind or the street. Mm-hmm. When they cut away from characters, like when they're chanting free drinks, whenever they cut away from them, their sounds go away. Like, their chants go away. And it's not because they don't know how to make movies. They're doing it on purpose to make you feel as uncomfortable, like as something feels wrong all the time. You mentioned the pacing of the editing. Like, everything stays a little too long. When he whips out his ass on them, and
right.
like when you in a comedy when someone pulls out their ass, it's shown for like they always show it for like a half a second.
It's a pretty
never
fast
show it very
cut.
long.
Yeah.
And this they let you really look at it, and he just sits there
and they
with
cut,
his
they
ass
cut
out.
and they cut to other characters who have a couple lines of dialogue, and then they cut back, and he's still bent over with his ass out.
Yeah.
I do want to. What David said about how it's almost an achievement, I do want to hit that point because there's a quote from John Waters about how if you're going to make something that's in this bad of taste, you actually have to have really good taste.
Right.
Because you have to have this extremely precise idea of what sensibilities you're offending. So someone like me who I'm obviously always on here promoting my books. Like, I work in horror and shock humor, things like that. I will always run into people where it's like, well, why can you like write something serious? And from my point of view, it's like, no, you have to understand what I'm doing here is requiring all of the skill that I have. This is as good as it gets. I'm not saying that I could write a more serious book if I set my mind to it. Maybe I couldn't. But what I'm doing is actually really hard, or at least it's really hard for me, because you can do shock humor or gross out humor poorly. But to do something like this, where it almost dares you to stop watching, and I couldn't turn it off. It does take some skill. And I think the people who hate this or who could like think we're playing a prank on them by asking them to watch it, I think that would be the easy thing to say. It's like, well, they just went for the easy, like, constant poop humor or whatever. I think making something this uncomfortable actually takes a great deal of care. Same with like Tim and Eric. I think they used to get offended when lots of reviewers and press would talk about, this is a perfect show to watch when you're high. And they're both like, we're not stoners. Like, this is actually really hard. Doing absurdist stuff like this and where everything's just a little bit skewed and a little bit wrong. This is actually done with a great deal of care. We're not just getting high and saying stuff.
The South Park guys said the same thing, where it's like they get that question. It's like, no, we're not high when we're writing this. This is like really hard.
Terry Gilliam's another one who says that as well.
Yeah.
Where they're like, "You've taken acid," and he's like, "No, I don't. I don't take drugs."
Yeah. It's it's like my favorite aspect of it. These. Again, like I'm going to echo Jason, I don't know that I had necessarily a good time watching these movies, but I did. There are several parts that I laughed at, and there's definitely things that I appreciate about both these movies. I think my favorite aspect is something that you definitely need to be at least a director who's like with some level of talent, because one of my favorite aspects is the fact that the acting in this movie is so bad in both movies, but it's so precisely bad.
Right,
like it's bad in a very specific way. Like it's people waiting too long for their cue. It's people delivering the line with the complete wrong emotion. It's stuff like that where it's like it's really just, you have to understand what how a regular scene would play out, and then be able to identify, okay, here's the parts where I can tweak it so that it's weird and stupid and funny. So yeah, definitely. You need this. I think this guy's probably pretty good, or at least has a real solid grasp of what good taste is, because otherwise he wouldn't be able to pinpoint the things that he does in this movie.
Both, and I think this is more evident in Beverly Luff. It's very much it reminds me of Stella a lot too, where they know the tropes and beats of movies, especially in Beverly Luff. And what makes it fun to watch is that it's a realization of like everything we write in normal movies is completely arbitrary. Beverly Luff, one of the characters, oh man, I forgot his name. The romantic rival, but the person who plays Beverly Luff,
Colin or
Craig Robinson. Craig Robinson.
Oh, Craig Robinson. He's Beverly Luff.
Yeah, he's supposed to be like the plot of Beverly Luff, and I don't want to. We probably shouldn't jump through between the movies too much, but is that it's Aubrey Plaza and Jermaine Clement, and he's in love with her, and they're on a road trip, and she's obsessed with Craig Robinson's character. So he's like the romantic rival who's seen as deep, and for most of the movie, all he does is grunt.
Yeah, he doesn't say
all
a word.
He does is grunt, because when you think about it, what does he need to say? We know the trope of his character. If this was a Kevin James film or an Adam Sandler film or a Will Ferrell film, he would be a certain person. He would be played by like a Zac Efron, and he would have a bunch of dumb jokes. So like, why not? Like, why not just have him grunt? And like it's taking all the tropes, all the beats, all the exact like points of like a 3-act structure, and just saying like, well, it's all make believe. This is all bullshit. So why not just make it this? And I say Greasy Strangler is also that. Like as Jason described, it's a fairly straightforward plot at first, with just added madness. Go on.
I just want to circle back for a moment. The reason we're doing both of these movies in the same episode, there's a specific reason, because The Greasy Strangler came first, and it is kind of exists as this underground like film festival favorite that is just kind of this curiosity that when I saw it, I assumed I was the only person who'd ever watched it. You know, I found it on streaming. An Evening with Beverly Luff Linn is an all-star comedy cast that came out on Netflix that has like 6 different, like Aubrey Plaza and Jermaine Clement from, you know, What We Do in the Shadows and Flight of the Conchords, and Matt Berry from a whole bunch of BBC shows and What We Do in the Shadows, and Craig Robinson of The Office fame, and many, many, many other shows. Like, it is an all-star lineup. So The Greasy Strangler, this movie we've just been describing, that is like this punishing, you know, ordeal, that got this guy a follow-up that apparently every cool comedian in Hollywood wanted to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because they were all working for a fraction of what they would normally get paid, I'm going to guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were all... Yeah, they were all really into the Greasy, like Drake. Yeah. James Franco wrote like a column about it. Like everybody in sort of like the Apatow comedy sphere is really into the Greasy Strangler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It checks out.
So I wanted to talk about both of them because the second one is maybe a little bit more of a mainstream movie, but
it's way more palatable, but it still has the same tone where it's like it's daring you to watch it.
But I think they're kind of a fascinating pair to compare and contrast with each other. But this is the thing, was because I do feel like The Greasy Strangler is the type of movie that other comedians love, in the way that they love like that aristocrat's joke, where the entire point is it's not anything like you've been in before, and it's nothing like where so much of what it plays with is you've seen this bit a million times, you know what it's supposed to look like. So when it comes in 2 seconds too late, you feel it, but you only feel it if you've seen a ton of comedies and you know what to expect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's Norm Macdonald doing like dad jokes at a roast,
right?
And only the comedians laughing,
right? Like nobody laughing, but the comedians are in the back howling.
Yeah,
yeah, because the entire point is that it's those corny jokes coming out of his delivery, and it just doesn't fit. And that's it.
Right. That said, Tom, you said you laughed at this.
Yes.
The Greasy Strangler made me laugh, not in that perspective. It just made me laugh like a dummy would laugh, like a real dummy.
Well,
like when he's in that car wash and he's screaming.
Yeah.
And every time they show that, I couldn't stop laughing. And then they cut to just his prosthetic penis flapping as they're drying him off.
Yeah,
and it's the pacing of those two shots made me laugh every time, even when I knew they were coming.
Right.
Because I'm a child.
I'm going to guess no one in the listenership has watched this movie, or very few of them have.
Yeah,
I wonder if we should explain what scene we're talking about when we just mentioned it in passing. Well, like when he's in the car wash and his giant penis.
Yeah, it's his hideous dick plays a huge role in this movie.
Okay, so let me again set the scene for people who've not watched it.
Please do.
It's a romantic triangle between the dad character's named Big Ronnie. Everyone's first name is Big something.
Right.
His son is named Big Braden, and they are competing for the love. I think Janet is the woman's name.
Yes, yeah.
The father, who is also secretly the Greasy Strangler, covers himself in a solid inch of grease and strangles people to death until their eyeballs pop out.
Yes.
And then he usually eats them, or on at least one occasion.
It's very trauma. The gore is very trauma films. Like it's not realistic gore. It's cartoon gore.
Yeah. So the father, Big Ronnie, has a giant penis, a prosthetic penis. He wears pants with a transparent window that shows off his penis as it's kind of like crammed and distorted against his thigh. Which apparently, reading some of the behind-the-scenes materials, that was a challenge to deal with because it had to be in exactly the right position. Mm-hmm. And then his son, Big Braden, has a tiny penis prosthetic that he wears. Both of them are naked quite a bit.
Yeah,
it can probably be surmised from what we're saying. Right. And so after the Greasy Strangler has finished killing people, he always goes into a car wash that is run by a blind man and runs himself through the car wash, but tells the blind guy that he's running his car through it.
Right.
Because he got his car greasy, is what he keeps telling him. But in reality, he's just standing there with his giant prosthetic penis flapping around. Mm-hmm. And then, as he is secretly the Greasy Strangler and killing many people, in about 50% of the conversations he has with someone, he interrupts with, "I bet you think I'm the Greasy Strangler, don't you?"
Right.
Yeah. That's how
because he also requires grease on everything he eats.
Yeah, like a repulsive amount. And that's the very first scene, incidentally, is his son coming in to wake him up, and he says, "I bet you," he doesn't say that. He says, like, I'm the Greasy Strangler, and it's like, you're a bullshit artist, which is a repeated motif in the movie.
Fucking bullshit artist, perfect.
Yeah, it's
just to be clear. At that point in the movie, we have not heard anything about the Greasy Strangler or seen any murders or heard any reference to it. The first time we hear the word spoken or any mention of in the movie is him saying, I bet he's like demanding that he wants grease in his coffee instead of milk, I think.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, I'm so into grease. I bet you think I'm the Greasy Strangler. He's like, no one said that. He's like, well, I am the Greasy Strangler. And he says, yeah, you're a bullshit artist. That's apropos of nothing. Like, you don't see him commit murders. None of those words are totally meaningless at that point of the movie.
It's the first 3 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, and then the second 3 minutes of the movie is someone arguing about that they expected free drinks on there. His day jobs, he gives walking tours of, it's a disco walking tour of famous disco acts, but it's never... It's just like, here's like a doorway where the Bee Gees were standing when they discussed they were going to write Staying Alive. They were waiting for someone to pick them up. But it's just it's just a doorway. It's not marked by anything. But that's not even, like, that could have been played for a joke, but then instead you spend several minutes with just the tour group insisting they had been promised free drinks, and then him shouting back, no one promised you free drinks, and it just goes back and forth like that for a very long time.
Yeah.
And at that point in the movie, you've now had two scenes where it has tested your patience in two very different ways, but it does not ease you into its universe at all.
No,
you're pretty much just right. You're pretty much just right in it.
The style of humor, because it's not like, they do go for jokes in these movies, and it's not always just playing with. Well, actually, it is always playing with your sensibilities. But the style of humor, this kind of reminded me of like a really R-rated version of like Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh yeah. I
like
could see
that kind of humor where it's there's no real jokes. It's just like the off kilter things that people do and say.
Like, I don't laugh out loud at Tim and Eric, but I watch it. That doesn't mean I don't like it. It's just, for me, that's not what it is. And I don't think I laughed out loud at Napoleon Dynamite, but I watched it and enjoyed it, because to me it's not that kind of comedy. For me, something that's going to make me laugh out loud, it's usually some sort of there's an actual setup and a punchline or a beat. Here it's more like Napoleon Dynamite takes place in an alternate universe, right?
Yes, yeah.
It takes place in a universe where everything is the 80s for some reason, and it's a little bit weird, and the rules are different from what they are in real life, and just the way people behave, and that's it. It's just like a literal surreal trip. And Tim and Eric is like that too, where everything is this, it's got this sensibility of like public access TV and all that, but it's not, it's rare that I would just laugh out loud at it. Here, I think the only one bit I can remember actually laughing at was the story Big Ronnie tells about. He's clearly lying, like he's BSing Janet, trying to impress her.
The Michael Jackson.
And it tells him the story that because he claims to have been a part of the disco scene for years. And I'm not going to read. I have the transcript over here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's like, I used to run a nightclub. I booked all the disco acts. I knew them personally. One time I had to drive Michael Jackson to the airport, and on the way we decided to stop at this little blues club because he wanted to kick back with a bottle of wine and a cigar. It was a quiet night. He was eating these delicious nachos. I broke into the DJ booth and put Smooth Criminal on the sound system. I wanted to boogie, and so did Michael. He got up and started dancing on the table, and the security guard came up and tried to take him down, so I punched him the fuck out. It's just like, his lies just keep stacking until a couple of Korean girls start hitting on them, and then he and Michael take them in back and both have violent sex with them while everyone is watching and applauding.
Everybody claps.
And even the way I'm reading it is far inferior to the way he reads it, because he's got this robotic tone where it's clear he's lying, but it's like it's the scripted story that he's told many times. And then she just immediately believes it's like, wow, you must have led a really exciting life. I guess that's as close to like a bit you could hear in a Will Ferrell movie, though. So maybe that's telling on myself that the thing that I laughed at most was the most like traditional.
Well, he has a couple. I mean, it is kind of Will Ferrell-y, but like he tells a much less crazy story later about like how John Travolta said that Braden was like a good baby or something.
There's a lot of the because people believe the stories. This is a very Stella thing where like when they call the detective, what's the detective's name?
Jody,
Detective Jody, and it's clearly just Big Ronnie with press-on nails and
fake braces,
and they just and fake braces, and they just treat him like he's perfectly in disguise.
Right.
That felt very Stella to me, where it's like characters are just like extremely stupid in weird moments.
Does everybody in the audience know who Stella is? You keep saying it's like Stella. Do they think that's a woman that you're referring to, or do we have to explain?
We might have to. It's the offshoot of the state that had David Wayne, Michael Showalter, and Michael Ian Black.
I heard a good description of them, which was the Marx Brothers on acid, which is they had like one season, maybe two, on Comedy Central.
Mm-hmm. They did a lot of web stuff before that too.
Yes. And it's very like it's like cartoony, almost kids jokes mixed with like really adult things.
Right, like there's a sketch, like there's a very Three Stooges kind of, like Marx Brothers kind of sketch where they're like pretending to be doctors and they just take it to the conclusion where they're actually performing surgery on people.
They did that in Stella where their landlord is it's very cartoony of them trying to please their landlord, and he kicks them out, and they show up dressed in mustaches as wealthy businessmen to get the apartment back, and he completely believes it, and then he has a heart attack because he realizes it's them, so they perform gory surgery on him and just murder him.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, that sucks. And then someone comes in and he's like, actually, he was a famous Nazi doctor, so you did a good thing. And then they're like, oh, yay! And then it ends.
Yeah.
And these are the guys that made is it Wet Hot American Summer? Is that the name of the movie?
Yes, yeah.
And because David Wayne kind of is a big deal in the industry. Everybody involved in that has made a bunch of other stuff since then. Yeah. But that, I don't know. Yeah, I do. I think that sensibility that's the first time I think I really started to see it become a thing. And I don't know if there's a specific school of comedy they all came from or what.
I don't know. I think the State was the first place that I saw that style. Yeah. But obviously they didn't invent it. It's just... Yeah,
I would go all the way back to Monty Python with this stuff, right?
That's kind of true, yeah. There's
it's
a lot...
absurdist, gory, kind of...
And if you watch... you can watch Flying Circus, which is their TV show on Netflix right now, and a lot of the sketches do test your patience.
Yeah, oh yeah.
They do play with shit like that.
One of the best freaking parts in Holy Grail is when he's running up on the castle, and they keep cutting back to him, still kind of far away, and he never gets any closer until he's suddenly close.
Yeah.
But that did that's essentially a visual setup and punchline.
Yes. Yeah.
I think absurdist humor evolved since then to being like, what if there isn't even a punchline?
What if there's neither?
Yeah.
There's no setup and no punchline and everything's just weird.
But that is a good example, though, because like that, the whole bit, which some of the people out there can visualize in their head and some have never seen it, but it's playing with you've seen a million scenes and you know what editing is supposed to look like. And they just make the shots not match up. It just doesn't. Yeah. And that's it. It's hilarious, but it's only hilarious because you've seen many, 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 many scenes and you know what it's supposed to look like. I think the Greasy Strangler is specifically aimed at people that have been watching, movies through the 90s and the 2000s and all that, and especially have been watching comedies, and the way that people in movies are all very smooth and they're very personable and very charismatic and they're all very sexy. Even in a comedy about losers, everybody's pretty attractive, and and you can when they shoot in a comedy, if you have like a loser's apartment, like their dirty apartment is still pleasant to look at because just by the rules of cinema, there's like a messy apartment, but it's not like a real, a meth user's apartment back in the small town where I'm from. It's not going to look like that. It's going to be messy in a Hollywood way, just as, like an overweight woman in a Hollywood movie would be a thin woman out in the world. It's like the rules are different, but everyone treats her as the gross fat girl because she weighs 135 pounds or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's like that. Whereas it's here is like, okay, we're actually going to have people who cannot communicate in a way that's pleasant, and they cannot, and they are not charismatic at all, or they have no, everything about how they relate to other people and everything about how they talk, and just it's that layer of pleasantness that you never know is there with movies until it's suddenly gone.
Yeah.
Like the house itself, I was reading some stuff about behind the scenes. The house they filmed in was a real problem because it had black mold and it was disgusting. And you can tell while watching.
Yeah, it's a real piece of shit.
Yeah.
And I think all the locations have been scouted carefully to be unpleasant in a specific way. Even the exteriors, like everything is it's very depressing, but also just weird. Again, a lot of care went into everything. I think if you pause it and look at what everyone is wearing, you'll see that every item of clothing has been chosen very carefully.
Yeah. The only beautiful place is the ending in the forest where they kill Ricky Prickles, which is the best name of the of the movie. I want to point out the ending because the ending is incredible.
Yeah, the ending is
go ahead
real
and give
insane.
a play-by-play of how it winds up.
Because all right, they're fighting over Janet, and she's sort of gone back and forth between them, and in the end, his father, the Greasy Strangler, like kidnaps Janet. And the son is like, all right, well, I can do this too. And he gets in the father's grease because it's like, mask off. He's the Greasy Strangler. Everybody knows it. So he covers himself with grease and he also becomes a Greasy Strangler. And we should note that when he covers himself in grease, it's like a prosthetic suit. Like he looks like a monster. And so now the son does too. He finds them in the movie theater, runs in and starts choking Janet himself. And bonds with his father over choking the love interest of the movie until her eyes pop out. And then they go to the beach and reconcile. And then they go to the woods. And then they decide to kill Ricky Prickles, which is the father's ex-wife, the mother of his son.
It's his stepfather.
His stepfather, yeah. And they kill him in the woods. And then they... run around and come upon a firing squad that appears to be also killing them, like doppelgangers of them tied to trees, and they shoot them, and then their heads explode and with confetti, and champagne comes out, and then the last shot is them like climbing up on a mountain with pointed sticks and just sort of like growling and pointing the sticks at the camera, and it cuts away. And that's the film.
And that's how it ends.
Right, because again, in the typical plot, the whole thing would be eventually the father and son realize, like, no, we can't let this woman, like, the family bond is deeper, and we're, like, this is really about our competition with each other and not about her, and we have to reconcile and realize why this matters. It's just the way they choose to execute that resolution is just madness. It's just, yeah.
Because it's like Monty Python, where at the end the cops come and arrest them all. It's like that's as good as an ending as any. Like this movie's got to end, and so this is just like, yeah, fuck it.
But the joke is, you've seen this movie a million times. You know what the resolution is supposed to look like, and there's only a couple of ways it can go, and we're not going to go there.
No, we're not.
It's going to be actually very difficult to describe where we choose to go with this.
It's still like, yeah, it's the son realizing that he's like his father and coming to terms with that. But in the movie, that translates to the son covering himself in grease and strangling his girlfriend,
and becoming a serial killer, right?
Yeah, and then they eat her eyes. I want to point out, by the way, the co-writer of this, who wrote Come to Daddy, which is about Elijah Wood coming to meet his estranged father, also did the ABCs of Death short. That's G is for Granddad. So everything this writer has done has to do with fathers and sons for some reason. And I don't know what that
means.
I don't know what that means. Yeah, exactly. But it means something.
Yeah, clearly it means something.
Yeah.
There is
go on.
Well, I was just going to say there's some interesting behind-the-scenes stuff to talk about, because it's on IMDb, the actor that plays Big Ronnie, I guess this was his first starring role. And that for
Michael St. Michaels.
Yeah, for decades he had been like a background actor, which I think you just get paid like $12 an hour to just be in the background of things.
Right.
But he claimed to have been, in the 70s, he was a jet-setting hairdresser for the world's elite. But I guess the director, Jim Hoskins, I guess he said in an interview that he doesn't think that's true. He could not find any evidence of that being true. But if you look at him, he looks like a 70s famous hairdresser. Like he looks like that's the where he came from, which that's what makes him perfect for this movie. Like he's got a very interesting face, and you can't forget it. But I don't know what that means, other than I would like to know more. But he apparently, if nothing else, he tells people that.
It's weird to think about him as an actor, because he does things in this movie that you're like, well, I would never do that on camera.
Give the listeners an example.
You pretty much see his butthole. Like he does he flips on the bed backwards, exposes his ass and farts, like a jackass stunt.
Yeah.
He is constantly mostly naked, as is the other guy, but it's very undignified. And like listening to the commentary on him and like seeing an interview with him, he's just like, yeah, I mean, I'm an actor, I'm just doing what the director told me to do. And it's like, surely it can't just be that simple.
No, you get a lot of that though in the cast interviews, because the actress that plays Janet said the same thing, and the guy, and I guess he must know the Braden Sky Elbar, because he turns up in Beverly, Luff, Linn.
Yeah,
I think he was one of the first roles cast, but they all were very nervous, and it's like their family's going to see this. And you don't think about actors going through that, because you figure, well, you're an actor, it's your job. But it's so much of this plays like a bunch of people who are deliberately trying to end their Hollywood careers.
Yes.
But that's why I wanted to do both movies, because I find it so fascinating that these people, they're all unknowns, totally unknowns. It's in the Greasy Strangler. Like they all got on board and was like, what do we have to lose? Yeah. Like we're gonna trust this guy, and we're just gonna go for it. And then Elijah Wood, who's spending his Lord of the Rings money this way, using his influence basically to get movies like this made, and getting the funding for it, and is just trusting that it's gonna be something. And then from that, he gets like his mainstream big Netflix movie. That's almost a lesson for people trying to break into whatever, whether it's even just being a YouTuber or writing books or whatever, making movies. Man, make your weird thing stand out.
Yeah.
Because if your goal is like, well, I watch a show like The Sopranos, I think I'd like to make that someday. It's like, yeah, but if you just write The Sopranos or whatever, or your version of it, probably nobody's going to notice. But if you just take the weirdest idea you've got, you might be shocked by how much it does connect with people. Because here's something where, again, when I first saw it, I thought, I'm one of like 12 people that's rented this movie. Like, there's no way anyone else has even seen this. I think I rented it because I thought the title was funny and the description sounded funny, and it's like, it's like this weird horror movie. I actually thought it was a slasher movie. And then you find out, oh no, among actual creatives who can get projects made, they all loved it, and you'd be surprised. I in some way found that out myself too. But you mentioned South Park earlier. That's how Matt Stone and Trey Parker made like this incredibly profane short. They didn't try to make like their version of The Simpsons, like the most well-honed, polished show they could make. They made the most profane, insane thing with this art style made of literal cardboard or construction paper cutouts, and it set the world on fire. They're billionaires now because of that. Right. Make your weird thing. There is no chance that your idea is too weird to be made. None.
Yeah. Looking at Beverly, Luff, Linn, what usually happens is they love that weird thing, and then they're like, okay, now let's make it a little less weird.
Yeah. And if we want to move on to that one, that's fine, unless if there's more factoids about the Greasy Strangler we've not covered yet.
I mean, I could talk about the Greasy Strangler for days. I don't know.
Yeah, we can talk about the other movie.
All right, we might jump back, I'd say, because if I remember something,
there's a lot of the same. It's a lot of the same points to be made about both films, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, the big difference is, I already pointed out that Beverly, Luff, Linn has a bunch of well-known actors in it.
Yeah.
It's fucking Emil Hirsch for some reason.
He might have been my favorite character.
he's giving it his best.
He's doing like 70s sleazeball bad guy. His name is Shane Danger.
Well, giving characters wacky names is another thing that's considered like the lowest form of comedy, I guess, because you mentioned like Ricky Prickles in the last movie. But like the character names in An Evening with Beverly, Luff, Linn, it's Lulu Danger, Colin Keith Threadner, Shane Danger, Ronnie Von Donkensteiger, Beverly, Luff, Linn, Mitch Stemp, Tyrone Paris, Carl Ronk. It's like it's important to them that everyone have a stupid name, which again, in a lesser movie, it'd be like, okay, like that's something like you write in middle school where everybody's got like his name is Dr. Fudge Penis, but here it's never, because everyone in the movie is obviously playing it straight. No one ever laughs in this movie. No one knows they're in a ridiculous universe, right? Like everyone is dead serious all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's also, everybody has they're not like laugh out loud funny, but like everybody's license plate is like a really silly word.
See, I didn't even catch that.
Neither did I.
Like Shane Danger's license plate is Bubbles. Colin's license plate says Sizzlin'. Or maybe that might be Beverly Luff Linn's license plate. But like, every time you see a license plate in the movie, it's a vanity plate that's a single word, and it's always just like a very silly word. And I don't know, that tickled me for
why
some
not?
reason.
Yeah, why not? I think that's a perfect like microcosm for the whole thing, where they're like, look, we have to have license plates in these shots. Why not have them be dumb?
Yeah.
Like, why not have them be silly?
Well,
it's the same with the names. It's like, you got to write a name, might as well be something stupid.
And like, there's a subplot or a MacGuffin in this movie, which is a lockbox of cash that gets stolen, that kind of like kicks off the plot in a lot of ways. But the box is like covered in fur.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's never like a close up of it. Like, it's just taken for granted. Like, no one remarks on it or notices it. It just is. In that universe, that's what a box full of money looks like. It's a luxurious, furry box.
Yeah, why not? Well, man. The casual weirdness, them all being at like the laundromat and they're all in their underwear.
Right, like they're washing the clothes they were currently wearing. They're just standing there in their underwear.
Yeah. But also never commented upon. It just
exactly,
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one in the movie notices this or thinks it's odd.
I'd say Emile Hirsch is the one who also is the most willing to get in a thong for this movie. To get because like that's the one thing this movie's doesn't have that the Greasy Strangler has, which is it's way less gross. There's less nudity. There's no prosthetic genitals.
Mm-hmm.
And it does feel like in part because we have actors and actresses in this who are like, no. Like I have a agent and a lawyer here, and these are the things I will do and these are the things I won't. And they're like, all right, we can work with that. Because it was more important to get these people than to be super weird, right?
Though to be fair, this is a different genre. The Greasy Strangler was a horror movie.
That's true.
And that's a movie that would have, a lot of gross body horror and stuff like that. And this is like a romantic comedy, I guess. It's like
okay.
the setup,
and also kind of like a little bit of like a crime drama.
Yeah, well, this is funny. On IMDb, Greasy Strangler is comedy, horror. This is comedy, crime.
Yeah.
On IMDb.
So that's also part of it. I don't want to accuse the guy of like selling out for this because it may just be this like a different aesthetic that he went with. But one thing is that it's easy to watch the Greasy Strangler if you watch it first and think that the stilted delivery is because these are all amateur actors.
Right.
Whereas here, these are all obviously stars, and it's the same thing. Like it's the same weird pauses when you realize, oh, this is a choice they're making. Because I can't. What's the opening scene? Is it in the coffee shop?
The opening scene is Emile Hirsch walking out of his office and just no look pointing off screen at the counter and being like, "What is that?" Like it's the winter roast. Why is it on display? I don't know. I was excited about having a winter roast. And then they go back and forth about this winter roast. But yeah, the first thing you see is just him walking out of the office looking very intense, but his name tag very conspicuously says Shane Danger. And he has like a 70s porn stash.
Oh, it's so good. That's... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's almost funnier that it's on Netflix because The Greasy Strangler you have to pay to watch.
Yeah,
it's on Amazon Prime.
I watched it for free on IMDb TV with commercials. which meant that during the scene when the guy gets his bag of chips stuck in the vending machine and they have a long conversation about what the chips are made of, and then the Greasy Strangler shows up and strangles them, right after that scene ended, it came up with an ad for "I shit you not, a bag of chips."
Oh, perfect.
It was like a Lay's commercial.
They're like, people are going to want Lay's right after
It's like,
this.
I have never wanted chips less in my life than I do this moment. And they swooped in with that ad.
But
perfect.
An Evening with Beverly Luff Linn is on Netflix. So you can be watching some, an episode of The Office or whatever and reach the final episode of that and have it automatically deliver you into An Evening with Beverly Luff Linn. So if you're just your casual watching some romantic comedies on Netflix viewer, because The Greasy Strangler, there's a filtering process where you're probably not going to find that movie unless you go looking for it. Like the world does not spring The Greasy Strangler on you. But that's not true of An Evening with Beverly Luff Linn. And I know that Netflix got rid of their star rating system probably for situations just like this, because so many people would like bombard that with like one star or whatever. Because if you're just watching it, it's like, oh, this has got the girl from Parks and Rec and the guy from The Warehouse and The Office and all these other people. This will be fun. And there's just interminable conversation about the coffee. And the guy he's having the conversation with, that's with Big Braden, right? That's with Sky
he's talking to Tyrone in that scene, but Big Braden is the cashier that works with Aubrey Plaza.
Yeah,
and they have like a scene where he starts like doing weird dancing is another through line between these two movies. Yeah. He starts doing this weird dance, and she's like, "Are you break dancing?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm popping and locking or something." It's
but he's not. The thing.
He's just he has his arms straight out at his side, and he's moving his arms in very tight concentric circles, and that's all he's doing.
Yeah, and I don't know how long that person, this hypothetical viewer, would watch this before thinking there was something wrong with their television or something, like, because it just doesn't go anywhere. It just doesn't seem to, scenes don't seem to build to anything, or if they do, there's no logic to how they got there. Like, people are just inexplicably angry out of the blue and so on, and yeah.
Yeah, it's...
Marina watched, I think, 4 minutes of the movie, and then she was like, I can't do it.
It's like, it's the comedy equivalent of like a Terrence Malick film. Like, I'm reminded of the story, I think it was Tree of Life, where that movie, when
they played the reels in the wrong order.
They played the reels in the wrong order in a cinema, and the audience did not notice. Because why would they? This is the same, where it's like I guess that happens after that or before that, or I guess this is happening, whatever. Like, it's all a fever dream. It's completely it's one of my favorite parts about this is how much they throw things away. I love that Jermaine Clement's introduction is he's just a guy who's willing to get this guy's money for him for $200.
Yeah, and the scene where they invite him inside the house was very funny, just conceptually, because he shows up like with a gun at Shane Danger's house to take the lockbox back, and he knocks on the door and Shane answers, and then his Lulu is outside, and she's like, "Oh, is this the party man?" And he's like, "I guess." And she's like, "Well, why don't you invite the party man in for a drink?"
"Are you the party man? Party man?" Yeah. I think is what she says.
Yeah. Again, much like the opening,
is nonsense,
right? Much
nonsense.
like the opening scene of the Greasy Strangler, the party man has not. That's not a thing that's been discussed. Like, we don't. That's not referencing anything we've seen. It's completely out of the blue. And so, like, she's like, "Why don't you invite the party man in for a drink?" And they do. Like, he sits on the couch in between his friends, and he like makes them this really weird drink that's full of like Whoppers.
All the drinks they're
all insane. Yeah,
they're all insane. It's like chocolate bars and candy and mixed with booze,
and they all have like ridiculous names,
like a rum randy or something like that,
like a rum and tumbly, I think was one of them. And it's they have like
why not?
Yeah, why not? They have like a 2-minute scene before they realize that nobody knows who Jermaine is.
Yeah. And then he takes out the gun. Aubrey Plaza steals the gun and then just says, "You're coming with me."
Yeah.
And then they're on a road trip and he's in love with her.
Yeah.
Because, again, who cares? Who gives a shit? Like, we're making a romantic, like, road trip movie. Does it really matter how these two get together? That's, like, it's all arbitrary. It's all make-believe. So why not this? And then that's just the movie. Like, the movie that you think that it's like about a lockbox. No, it's not. No, it's about this. It's about going to a hotel.
She's going to a hotel where they're holding this event, an evening with Beverly, Luff, Linn. The posters that advertise this event, it's like a cardboard standee of Craig Robinson's character, Beverly, Luff, Linn, but his eyes are like lit up red. Like like demonic,
right? Like a haunted house decoration.
Yeah. And it's never explained what an evening with Beverly Luff Linn is. Like, what does he do? Is he like a motivational speaker? Is it like a magician? Because the only thing you see is his advertisement, which is this incredibly ominous. And then when you see him and like his manager is Matt Berry, and he won't speak, he just grumbles, he just growls.
Yeah.
And so you spend the whole movie, and she's like desperate to go see this event because she's in that, he's to be her lover or whatever, and that's the love triangle again. Is her pining after Beverly Luff Linn, and then this Jermaine Clement is in love with her, and then she like just disregards him, and of course you know where that's going. But the rest of the movie, the insanity is based off of you expecting it to go a certain way, but then there's this ongoing mystery of what an evening with Beverly Luff Linn entails, and then it arrives and he's doing like these British folk songs or something, or Scottish. I don't.
Isn't one about being like a baseball coach or something like that?
Yeah. He's playing like Irish folk songs.
Yeah, like, why did I become a football referee? Yeah. And these are songs that were written for the movie. I looked it up. So it's not at all clear why, because it's built up. He has like this mystique, like the way people treat him. And it's like this larger than life thing, and he sits down and in this very high pitched voice sings these. Yeah, they sound like these goofy old Irish, I don't know, pub songs or something.
In a voice that is clearly not Craig Robinson.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You guys have laughed more just in describing what goes on than I laughed watching the movie, because just watching it, it's just kind of like washing over me.
Right.
But then when you describe the drinks, and these big fancy drinks with like a lot of, we said the Whoppers, like the chocolate ones. Like
there's a chocolate bar in one of them.
Yeah, it's like Whoppers piled in it for some reason.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know, in the moment it's just a thing they're drinking, but the more you describe it, the funnier it is to me.
Yeah, it's just, there's a lot of stuff in this movie that's just conceptually very funny. So it's like it's sort of like a Napoleon Dynamite, or to some degree like a Wes Anderson movie, where it's like stuff that you don't laugh out loud at, but it's like it's one of those things you're like, oh, that's really funny. It's like that.
And yet I cannot emphasize enough to the listeners, Marina made it 4 minutes.
Right.
Yeah. Many people listening to this, and your loved ones, even that will be a lot to ask. I cannot overstate how unfunny many of you think these movies both will be. A lot of you will hate these movies.
Yeah.
One of the most shocking parts of this movie, by the way, was the first 10 seconds when the Universal logo came on, and it was like the big CGI logo, and it was like, oh no, what did you guys do? Oh shit. Like, that's such a, I can't believe, like, it's I mean, it's a real movie, but like, to treat it like that, like, this is a movie. Like, can you imagine this thing in like a theater? That would have been amazing.
My God.
I wonder if it was gonna get, because this is one of those movies where, like, it came out on Netflix, I think, just a few months ago, but the production date is like 2018. I don't know if this sat on somebody's
No, I think
shelf.
This was out 2018. It says October 19th. I think this has been out for a little while, because I was aware of it for a little bit.
I think it just turned up on Netflix recently, so maybe it was out for like on the pay platforms for a while. So do you think did this play in theaters?
I can't see that it did. It just says
it might have had a limited theatrical run, like a premiere, you know. But if I like, the Greasy Strangler is definitely like the more unfiltered, raw, perfect representation of this guy. But if he has to tone it down for actors, like, I want to see a movie he makes with John Malkovich and Jack Nicholson. Like, if I had Jeff Bezos money, that would be my primary goal, is to just get this guy to direct the most prestigious actors out there.
Yeah, or Tom Cruise would be the ideal, probably the ideal star for something like this. But yeah, and there's something about, like, not to get off on Tom Cruise, but, you know, one thing that bothers me, because Tom Cruise is so committed in a lot of ways, the whole thing, he famously does his own stunts to the point that, like in Mission Impossible, whatever the last one was, 5, I don't know, like the helicopter stuff, he was flying the helicopter. Like in this Top Gun sequel, he's flying the plane. Like he went out and learned how to fly a fighter jet. Okay, he will not make himself ugly for a movie.
No,
he will not let himself look like gross in a movie.
He did for Tropic Thunder.
Yeah,
right. But that was the bit.
Yeah, that was the bit.
And to be again, to his credit, that was his idea. He was the one who's like, I think this guy needs like really hairy arms. Like, I want prosthetic. Like, I want 6 hours in a makeup chair because I've got a vision for what this guy's like, really like sweaty and you know. But otherwise, like in the action movie stuff, you know, the guy's like 55 years old and is just, you know, he's like still like ripped and like he waxes his chest hair and he just, you know, looks at his hair is always beautiful. And then when he's been through like a helicopter accident, he's always got that little cut on the bridge of his nose. Like that's like the one wound he'll get on his face, like a little cut on his cheek and that right on the bridge of his nose, that little bit, that pleasant little cut you can put there that kind of makes you look a little bit rugged but doesn't mess up your face at all.
Yeah,
there's something about actors that are willing to like just go all in on something like the Greasy Strangler or whatever. Like I don't know if you could have, because the director even said that he wouldn't have made that if it hadn't been a group of unknowns, because otherwise it just becomes a stunt. You know, it's like, oh, we got Tom Cruise to throw his legs over his shoulders and fart at the camera. And that's all they'll talk about. It's like, that's Tom.
yeah.
I would spend $17 to watch that.
Right, but the bit becomes, we got Tom Cruise to do this.
Yeah.
As opposed to, you're now in an alternate universe. You see what I'm saying? You're not watching as a movie. You're watching as, oh, look, that's Tom Cruise. It's that obnoxious thing that some movies do when a guest star appears. I think Kevin Smith movies are kind of bad about this, where the camera pauses for you to applaud.
Right, yeah.
The Force Awakens did it when Harrison Ford walked onto the screen. It's like when he and Chewbacca walked into frame, and the shot just held for a moment because it's like, well, this is when everyone's applauding. Right. And it's like the movie stops, just like, look, it's Han Solo, everybody.
Right. Decades later, people are going to be watching, like, why is that pause there? That doesn't make any sense cinematically.
And like in a Kevin Smith movie, when like Matt Damon shows up, it is like pauses for a moment. It's like the joke is he's on screen. So it's almost, I admire the people that made an Evening with Beverly Luff Linn, because it is in some ways, like so many people that watch this going to be like, what was she thinking? Like, because Aubrey Plaza can be in pretty much anything she wants, right? It's like, why does she have to be in this? It's like, well, she didn't have to be in this. Like, this is something she knew most people would hate, and that's what she and everyone else found interesting about it. Is just like everything about it is wrong. It's like, oh, I've got to be a part of this, because it was on the strength of the Greasy Strangler that they wanted to be in this, and
right.
You know,
it reminds me a lot of Crank. Because Crank was made in Jason Statham's career in a point where he didn't have to do a movie like Crank. He didn't need a scene where he's in a hospital gown with a visible erection, but he wanted that. And then those directors went on to do a Ghost Rider movie, and they did it exactly the way they would. And there's like interviews with Nicolas Cage where he's like, yeah, you just sort of, they tell you to do something, you do it. Like, because that's what actors do.
That is the Ghost Rider movie wherein Ghost Rider famously pees fire.
Yeah, and Nicolas Cage says, like, yeah, they say, okay, you're going to be pissing fire in this scene. You're like, okay, I guess I am. Because a lot of actors that's what they do. They're just like, yeah, I do the thing. I do the thing they told me to do. That's what they're paying me to do. It's just very funny how, like, yeah, no questions asked. Okay, yeah.
Now,
all right, Jason, in this scene, you're gonna have you're gonna be in a hospital gown, and you're gonna ride on a motorcycle, and you're gonna have an erection. And Jason Statham's just like, okay, yeah, sure, man. I'm gonna assume it'll look good later.
In Nicolas Cage's case, I do feel like he could maybe take an extra moment to consider the roles. Like he may be too open to doing literally the first thing he's asked to do.
Yeah, if you've ever seen the movie Between Worlds, it's a very good case for what you're saying.
Right. Nick Cage is a very different beast than what we're talking about.
He would do the thing in this movie where he'd flip over and fart at the camera.
He might.
Like, he might.
He really might.
Yeah.
But yeah, like everybody's in Beverly Luff Linn because they wanted to be in Beverly Luff Linn.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure these people probably came to the director, right?
Something like that.
Or at the very least, as I mentioned, they worked for a fraction of what they would normally ask for. I mean, Craig Robinson has, been the lead in sitcoms before. He's had his own shows, at least briefly. Like, he can ask for a decent amount of money to be in your thing. Like, you get all of these people, and there's like 6 pretty big names in this. Mm-hmm. They're all working at a discount. And that's something I kind of love, and especially... Elijah Wood seems to his post Lord of the Rings career and Daniel Radcliffe's post Harry Potter career. They both have really made it a mission to get like weird stuff made and to be in some weird stuff and to make themselves ugly. I don't know if you guys have talked about the Swiss Army Man movie that maybe won for the next episode, but that's a case where that's a performer. Like having no like regard for, well, I need to look a certain level of cool. Like I'm still me. I still got a brand to protect. Like he's playing a corpse with an erection that's constantly farting, and it's not just that gimmick. Like the entire movie's propelled from that. I don't know. I really admire that because you can see people like that taking the occasional big role that kind of pays for the other stuff.
Right, like he's in Now You See Me Too. Like it's after Harry Potter, it's like this sea of really weird shit, and then Now You See Me Too.
Yeah,
so it's like,
just coming up for a little money, grabbing that money, going back down.
I mean, I'm sure he's fine. He made 7 of them Harry Potter movies, or 8.
Yeah, of them. I think he's doing great. Elijah Wood as well.
But that is, and in that case, maybe less about money and more about just maintaining a certain profile so you can still get like projects over the line. But that's true. Yeah. Where would we be without people who use their fame that way? It's like I'm now going to, and I guess to a different degree, like George Clooney kind of did this for a while, where it's like he could have just kept being different versions of Batman, or could have went out to be, I don't know, an American James Bond or whatever, but instead took his superstardom and kind of got these, smarter movies made, or stuff that, again, if you don't attach his name to it, it just doesn't get made.
Yeah, Elijah Wood is a big one for that because, freaking Color Out of Space and Mandy, that's huge. He also did Daniel Isn't Real, which is I've yet to see that, but that's apparently really good.
I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on Shudder.
Oh, okay. He's great in Come to Daddy as well. That's a movie, again, the writer of the Greasy Strangler, and it's not a dignified role. I think there's a mainstream version of this, which is Wes Anderson, right? Is like whenever an actor sticks themselves in a Wes Anderson film, that's the equivalent of like, I'm going to do a weird indie thing.
Yeah.
And then there's this level.
Right.
Where they're like, no. That's not the weird indie thing. It's this.
Oh, well, now...
I would also... Oh, go on.
Now that you mention it, I guess Wes Anderson also does a thing where it's like the non-gross version of this, where everyone is very stilted in how they speak. Like, no one shows like genuine emotion. It's all this everything's very deadpan, and they're very like they stand very upright and arrange themselves, and it's like that Dollhouse style where the actors are kind of, I don't know, they're not playing, they're like robotic or something. It's kind of, I guess, a similar, there's probably a word for that school of filmmaking or theater where people they're speaking in like a very unnatural way, and maybe I'm not educated enough to know what it's called, but it's clearly distinctly a thing, right? Like you see 5 minutes of a Wes Anderson movie, you know what it is, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, there's different levels of it, I think. There's like I would argue like Kevin Smith or Diablo Cody films also have this. They don't talk like humans, or Tarantino. But then there's the ones where it's like this really dry version where everybody's very unemotional. I don't know exactly what to call it either.
Yeah, and like in a Wes Anderson movie, if you see 2 characters in bed, they're like both laying stiff as a board. The sheets are like laying over them perfectly. It's like arranged. It's not natural. It's not 2 human beings in bed at all. It's like an arranged scene, And it's just this ultra specific aesthetic that takes a ton of work and a ton of effects work and set work. Like, it's very difficult to pull off. I don't necessarily like it, and Wes Anderson movies turn me off for that reason. I can't connect with them because it's like these aren't people. It's too cutesy or something. But I'm the only person I know who thinks that.
It's too artificial. Oh, I know other people who are not a fan of Wes Anderson.
Oh, okay.
Because it's a very, I think anybody like that. I've gotten slowly turned off by Tarantino, and I don't think it's the filmmaker's fault. I think it's like cilantro, right? Where it's like, it's a very strong flavor, and some people are just gonna not like it because it's just very distinct. It's very specific. I do think this movie, An Evening with Beverly, Luff, Linn, now that I think about it, I think that's the type of movie that this movie is specifically playing off of and spoofing. Like, the ending of this film is very indie comedy. It's just them saying "I love you" to each other in separate beds. Mm-hmm. And like the whole movie, when you think of it through the lens of like a movie like Nebraska or a Wes Anderson film where it's like a quirky indie comedy road trip, that's really what this is, but they're just replacing everything with absolute nonsense.
Yeah, and at no point have these two ever done anything to endear themselves to each other at all. There's not one millisecond of chemistry or fun or them sharing a joke or a moment or anything. They're just in proximity and they fall in love because, as you said earlier, that's what happens in these movies, and it's always just as nonsense in those movies too, that two people have known each other for one day would suddenly, they went on an adventure together for one afternoon and now they've got a lifelong bond. That's just as nonsense as this. They don't they don't even bother with that part. It's just that at the end they say, I love you, and that's it. All right.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Why not?
They dance. They have one ridiculous dance scene. Because again, why do they have to dance normal? What does it matter?
Yeah. Oh, the dance, man.
It's great. It's terrific dancing.
When Jermaine sneaks up to the house and you can see Shane and Tyrone and Carl dancing inside, that's like that might be the hardest I laughed at this movie.
And they're dancing. Are they celebrating having stolen the furry lockbox, or are they just having a party and that's what they do is they just dance? Like, why are they in there dancing? Is there even music playing?
I think there is music playing, and it's the movie. It seems to be suggesting that they're celebrating a successful heist, even though it was a complete clusterfuck.
Right. And again, in any other movie, it'd be them like drinking beers and like having a good time. No, they're dancing.
They're doing a real Danny McBride and Jorma Taccone and Hot Rod dance.
Yeah,
it's like being real ridiculous.
Yeah.
And doesn't the box have like $600 in it or something like that? It's some trivial amount of money.
Right. It's a very small amount of money. And like Jermaine was hired for $200.
Yeah.
So he brings up his $200 a few times.
And also, the escalation of the lockbox is simply that it's about wanting to buy a new TV. He has to let her go from the coffee place.
Yeah.
And then she complains about a new TV. And they keep talking about how this person, he saves. You don't save.
It's her brother.
It's her brother, yeah. And it's like, he saves. He doesn't save. And he's like, I save. And then it's just, I'm going to steal his lockbox with a handful of money in it to buy, apparently, a new TV.
It's another piece of just the movie's bizarre universe is that her brother is clearly Indian or Pakistani. But and he's wearing this real ridiculous Ronald McDonald hair.
Yeah.
And nobody ever addresses it. Like nobody ever.
No. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's like she references having grown up with him. So it's just like.
Doesn't matter. What does it matter?
Who cares? I mean, obviously, it could be adopted or she could be adopted, but it's just like the movie doesn't even go that far. Like it's just like, that's her brother. It's like, okay.
Sure.
Does it even say what's his last name? Does it even say?
I don't remember I remember his name's AJ, but they don't.
Okay.
Willis, I think. I'm looking at IMDb.
Okay. I don't remember if they ever say it in the movie, but they might have.
Oh man.
He's the same guy that from the tour group in the Greasy Strangler.
Yeah.
that wanted the potato chips, and then she's eating a huge bag of the same chips he was trying to buy.
Right.
See, I didn't.
Yeah,
catch
it all
that.
comes together.
Yep, it exists in the same universe as the Greasy Strangler.
not to spoil the Greasy Strangler for those of you who are about to go watch it, but the potato chip scene he keeps referencing, it's an argument that goes on for what feels like 2.5 hours about how one guy struggles to pronounce the word potato because he's foreign, and just keeps asking him over and over and over again, what are the chips made of?
And they just loop his answer, basically.
Yeah,
like
it's the same shot
recording.
and the same delivery. Yeah.
And it goes on for a very long time. Well, I'm fascinated by how many people listening want to now go watch one or both of these movies. If you've got Netflix, look, An Evening with Beverly Luff, Linn is free and is the more palatable of the two. I would venture a guess that if you dislike it, probably should not pay the $4 for the Greasy Strangler on Amazon Prime. Although it's, again, I don't know. I know you guys heard Tom say that he watched it on ad-supported IMDb TV. I don't know if the ads would hurt the experience of the Greasy Strangler or enhance it a lot.
It was really jarring a few times because they just have to find where an ad break goes, and then you cut from this completely surreal alternate universe to just like the hyper sanitized universe of television commercials. So
it's kind of art. You're describing like a new level of art.
Get some real whiplash watching this movie that way.
Do you have either of you? Do you have a lot of friends you would recommend one or both of these movies to? Like, if outside of the context of this conversation, like if they just asked you, like, what's a funny movie you've seen recently? Do you have people who you know would love one or both of these movies?
I have friends that, first of all, I believe Michael Swaim enjoys this movie.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't. Yeah. I hope I'm correctly representing him here, but I'm pretty sure he told me he enjoyed this movie, and I think for the same reason we're talking about it. But I'm not going to speculate.
I can't. I wouldn't.
It'd be amazing if he was like, I thought it was terrifying, an effective horror film.
Yeah, like he really likes it, but like for a really strange reason.
Yeah, an erotic thriller. No, I have friends that I would show this to, and worst case scenario, they have a terrible time, but they're, I've known them forever, so I'm just like, sure.
I can't imagine anyone outside of like my comedy friends enjoying this movie.
I have a lot of friends that, like, in college years we would get super, super high and watch Space Ghost. And I have to imagine those people would enjoy this.
Oh yeah, I have a couple of friends that might like it, but you really have to think.
It reminds me of, I've referenced this time before where I would go to this indie video store, I'd go to their cult section and just randomly grab a movie, and sometimes it would be like a John Waters film a lot of the times. And just get super high and watch that movie with a bunch of friends. And we ended up watching some extremely messed up things. And it just gives me those vibes again. There was a time, and it's like, when you're younger, I think you have more of a tolerance for that, right? Because when you get to a certain age, you're like, I don't have time for this. Like,
right. Like I can't imagine. Like I watched like Kids and like the Doom Generation and kind of the same way.
Doom Generation.
Like, I can't imagine
shit.
sitting down to watch Kids right now, like as a guy in his late 30s.
Right.
No, but I feel like, especially as like a teenager, some of the appeal of things you watch and listen to is, I know the grown-ups would hate this.
Yes.
Or my friends, the cool jocks at school and the cheerleaders, they would hate this. So the fact that they would hate it, you're not even enjoying it, but you're enjoying the fact that you're watching it and they would hate it, if it makes sense. It's a rebellion thing, And it's like when I was 14 years old and listening to gangster rap, I didn't have any context for what I'm listening to. It's just, I knew that my parents would hate it, and I could feel the energy of it, and obviously it's some is being made by actual musical geniuses, so it's good music, but I'm only listening to it because it's like, oh yeah, this is outside of what normal people like, and that makes me cool and smart and whatever. A lot of that stuff doesn't hold up when you're in your 40s.
Yeah. Well, that's that realization, I think, is that, like, when you're young, you're like, oh man, Marilyn Manson shocks adults, and then you learn as you get older, like, no, he didn't shock them. They just like had Alice Cooper, and they were like, yeah, we've seen it. Like, it's not like offensive jokes when like adults didn't laugh when you were a kid. It wasn't necessarily because it was offensive. It's just because they've heard it all. Yeah. As you get older, and you're like, no, it's just not funny.
A good example
I'm not shocked.
Would be a kid like thinking that you didn't like some poop jokes from Austin Powers 3 because you're like old and that's too gross for you, but the old person grew up on John Waters. It's like, no, I'm watching a lame version of that. It's like, someday we'll both sit down and watch Pink Flamingos together. But for now, no, this is boring. I can see what Marilyn Manson is doing. He's a guy who is not maybe super great at playing the music and has figured out that, well, makeup and weird contact lenses scares teenagers, and they think that's dangerous. And it's like, oh, that guy's okay. Yeah. I've seen that guy before. That guy's been around forever, and this is not even a very interesting iteration of it. But
I like that Alice Cooper just writes like books about golf on the side.
Well, and like I think Gene Simmons has like a conservative Twitter. Is he? I'm maybe confusing him with somebody else. But he's like cranky about like, when did they? Yeah. There's not enough chicken in this canned soup anymore.
Yep, that's
it's like Andy Rooney is just like complaints about. The golf course we had to wait for 45 minutes. It's like, oh God, is this what we're all headed for?
Danzig also had a soup demands. Danzig wanted French onion soup for like some festival, and like really like caused a big problem with his demand for soup.
He wanted French onion soup
because he's Danzig. I don't know. But I mean, all that said, I would say the Greasy Strangler did surprise me.
No, I cannot emphasize enough for anyone listening to this. I am so happy that this movie can exist.
Yeah.
It is expensive to make a movie. It is hard to make a movie. It is hard to get a movie made. It is hard to get a cast and crew together and to get it released where people can see it. That a movie this weird can still make it in front of my eyeballs and then be influential enough that the people involved got more work.
Yeah.
Something about the system is working because there is not enough weird stuff in the world. Art, it's supposed to be weird. If art is not weird, it's useless. And if all comedy is just the same 5 situations and the same like gross out jokes and the same teenage rebellion stuff, and it's the same setup and punchline that you can feel coming a mile away, and it's the same kind of, where even the nerds are sexy and the ugly girl would be the hottest girl in your high school in real life. And if that's comedy, and if it's, I don't know, the Judd Apatow thing where you can just tell they just ad-libbed 20 versions of the same line and edited it together, and it's not interesting in how it's shot, and it's just...
Right.
I don't know. Like, thank God. I know 80% of people that watch The Greasy Strangler will turn it off. They're not going to make it into a few scenes in. But man, I'm glad that it exists. I'm glad stuff like this is still being made. Thank God for Elijah Wood and people like him.
Yeah, that's how I start every day, by thanking God for Elijah Wood.
Yeah, you have a shrine.
Because he could have there's so many directions his career could have taken. He could have taken a very comfortable path for the rest of his life and just signed autographs at Lord of the Rings conventions or whatever. But he parlayed that into, it's like, no, the stuff that's not currently getting made because it's not profitable, we're going to find a way to make it, get it made on a budget, and get it out in front of the sliver of people who will love it to death. I think Come to Daddy is a great movie. I think that's a legitimately like a good movie. That is a movie I would recommend to people.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Come to Daddy. It's
weird, but it's very the way it's set up is really well done, and it's interesting, and it has actual characters, and there's emotional growth and everything. It is also very gory and all of that, but no, I like that movie a lot.
There's a moment in Come to Daddy where they briefly travel into the Greasy Strangler universe. I feel like.
Oh man, I need to watch it.
Yeah.
It dips in it's kind of the same way that you can watch like a Spider-Man movie and see a little glimpse of the Evil Dead in there. Because it's like Sam Raimi does just a little bit of Evil Dead stuff, and then it's back to it's kind of that, like it's there for flavor, but it doesn't take place like really in an alternate universe. Any more than any other movie would. It's like it's very gory in a way that violence is not really, but another one I would recommend. Yeah. So, but in terms of whether or not I would recommend An Evening in Beverly, Luff, Linn, again, if you've got Netflix, it's free. You can try it. You will know very quickly whether or not, because we can tell you the way it starts out, it will keep going like that.
It never rises above that tempo for the entire movie. Don't
say, well, I'll stick with it, see if it gets better. No, if you're turned off by the opening scene, you've made enough time investment. You are free to go watch something else and to never watch The Greasy Strangler. But if for some of the people listening to this, these will be your favorite movies of the year if you've not seen them yet. Yeah. There's a specific personality type. If you find yourself easily bored by mainstream movies or just even most movies you watch, and you just feel like you've seen everything, which that's my deal. I'm old enough now. I feel like I've seen every movie. Like even if it's a new movie, it's like I've seen the trailer. It's like I've seen that movie. I've not seen the specific movie. I know what this is doing, even if the movie thinks it's weird. Because these days it's like, well, if the movie has some like neon in it, the critics are like, it's a surreal carnival of madness, a feast for the eyes. It's like, okay, no, it's got like a weird soundtrack and some pink neon. That's not enough to blow my mind anymore. These movies I will not forget The Greasy Strangler for the rest of my life. There are individual lines in The Greasy Strangler that I will never forget for the rest of my life. And that is an achievement. I salute it.
Yeah. I say that's pretty much
I say people should just dive right into The Greasy Strangler. Buy it on Amazon.
Yeah.
Just immediately purchase it.
Don't rent it. Buy it. Buy it so you can watch it. Yeah. So it will be in your library forever. You literally cannot delete it on Amazon as far as I know. It will be there for you and your family to enjoy into the next generation.
You can share it with your children. Yeah. Oh man.
No, I'm right there too. I'm so happy I've seen this movie.
Yeah, it's
I probably will never watch it again.
I don't know if I'm ever going to watch it again.
No, I won't even consider watching it again.
I cannot stop thinking about the greasy grapefruit scene.
Oh my
it's just
God!
Like,
yeah.
Oh God damn!
Briefly describe the greasy grapefruit for people who are not quite sold. They've not made up their mind yet. For the fence sitters out there, describe the greasy grapefruit scene.
Big Ronnie is having his breakfast, and like everything, he puts grease on everything he eats. So he covers his grapefruit with grease, and I believe Janet's there.
Yeah.
And he's trying to seduce Janet. So he starts sensually massaging the grapefruit for, I don't know how long, 3 hours?
Yeah.
Did that scene last 3 hours?
It felt like about 14 hours, yeah.
Yeah. You just have to see it. You got to watch the movie.
At least once.
Or not.
Yeah, I don't know. You'll know very quickly, like we said.
Yeah. If you watch Beverly Luff and you're like, I need more grease. I like this movie, but I need it to be greasier. Then go and watch The Greasy Strangler.
I like this movie, but I wish it made me physically ill. Then watch The Greasy Strangler.
This is almost like an epilepsy warning where it's like, hey, it has a lot of strobe lights in it. If you get queasy easily watching movies, don't bother.
Don't even bother. It's like one of the foulest movies I've ever seen.
It will make you physically ill. And this is I know we just recommended people watch it just like 40 seconds ago, but it also, some of you, will make you physically ill and you will be physically unable to keep watching it. But how many movies have you seen can really say that?
Yeah.
Right. I don't normally have a problem. Yeah, that's not normally a problem for me, and it made me physically ill. Watching it, my stomach hurt. I was grossed out.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can probably wrap it up.
Yeah,
I think that's a sode. I think we did it.
Jason, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for bringing this to us, to our attention.
You're welcome. All of the listeners who are about to watch one or both of these movies are also welcome. And to the makers of the Greasy Strangler, who will hopefully notice a spike in their Amazon rentals and the residuals check that where I assume they get, like, knowing Amazon, they probably get like 45 cents every time somebody rents the movie.
IMDb will be like, let's put the good ads on that one. Everybody's watching it.
We got to plug my book.
Yes,
yeah,
please.
the book is now less than a couple months away, called Zoe Punches the Future in the Dick. You can find it by Googling that title at any place that sells books, or going to the counter of your local bookstore, wear a mask, and say, I want to reserve a copy of Zoe Punches the Future in the Dick by David Wong, aka Jason Pargin. There's people in the world that have read it. They seem to be pretty positive on it. And please, if you know an author, not even my book, if you know any authors and they're asking you to pre-order their book, it is extremely important that you pre-order the book, because what that does is there's this chicken or the egg thing where the books that sell are the ones that bookstores have chosen to stock. Like when a new J.K. Rowling book or something she releases under her pseudonym, they'll buy 8,000 copies of it and have like a mountain of her book in the middle of the store. Because they've bought all of those are the ones that sell, because they're very visible, because the sheer mass of the books they bought is the promotion. In order for your book to sell, bookstores have to buy a lot of copies. How bookstores decide how many copies to buy is by how many pre-orders they have. And so the pre-orders is how they judge what demand is like, and then based on what demand is like, that is how they dictate what is sold. So if you know a friend or somebody who is saying, hey, please pre-order the book, and you're like, well, I'll grab it. Once it's out, I'll grab it. I'm telling you, you are helping them tremendously, especially if they are not a superstar author. And I know a lot of you are friends with superstar authors. Mm-hmm. If you know just normal people authors, pre-orders are everything.
So do it.
Yeah.
Everybody do it.
What are you waiting for?
What are you waiting for? It's right there. It's waiting for you.
Oh man, Dave!
I'm very excited about it.
Oh yeah, for
sure. Did you want me to plug our thing?
I do. Yeah, I would love for you to do that. Yeah.
Okay. We have a Patreon. If people want to check it out, patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. There's exclusive podcasts there, like Tom and Jeff Watch Batman and Fox Mulder's A Maniac. You can check it out right now.
Woo! We also have a store, tpublic.com/store/gamefullyunemployed, where you can get t-shirts, mugs, stickers, posters, masks, all kinds of stuff if you want, or not.
Yeah.
I don't care.
I want to sell a mask with Jason's book. I would like a copy of. I would like to pre-order, or like written on the mask.
Yeah.
So you can then go to the bookstore. You don't have to say a word.
They just see you. Just point to the mask, and they know.
Yeah. And it's very efficient.
Yep. So you're being safe, and you're also helping Jason out.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
I think that's
it.
We did it.
We
did
guys.
It.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Till next time.
Say goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.